Beginning the current Daf Mesechtes Nedarim Daf Chavav, being on the top line of the Amid, where we continue regarding how to interpret the Machlekes Beishamis Hill of our Mishnah regarding one of the cases of Nidrish Kagas when he says, "You guys are eating my figs. You guys are all usher as a carbon on it." But then he finds out that his father and his brother, and he says, "Oh, I would never." That's a shkaga. So we have Machlekes Beishamis Hill. Is it only the father and the brother that are permitted because you don't even have to permit it? It's a negative shkagas. Or do you say that they're all going to be permitted? That was what Basil held. But then there's a machlekes in the Gemara. We had already the interpretation of Rabba. We're going to see the interpretation of Rabba, how to qualify this machlekes b'sham Basil. Today's daf. Something that's discussed in today's daf is again this case of Royce and Oichem Te'inim, and he says Harelichem Carbon comes out. He finds his father and his brother that were with them. And we discussed regarding a person made a ned of Isachilas Basa B'Yayin Kalashan. Like we said, we start off in the Gemara Pesach Mishabasa B'Yam Tayvim. This is the concept of neder shut mitzasa huta kulai. Now, if a person, what comes up in the Gemara's discussion is if a person makes a statement, which there's a contradiction between the initial and the final parts. Rabbi Meir holds toughest lashon rishon, you go based on the first. Rabbi Yisrael holds b'gmar dvar ad mitzvahs, you go based on the end. And the Gemara is going to bring that into this machlekes, which we have between Beishamai and Beisil. So we begin on the top of Chavav Med Aleph. Again, we were talking about nidrish kagas, which we said from the round that there's two types of nidrish kagas. One of the cases was he saw them eating the figs. Says, oh, it's a carbon, finds the father and brother. Beishamai says they're permitted, the brother and the father, because he never meant them, but the other ones that are with them are forbidden. And Beisil said, no, they're both permitted. So we had the opinion of Rabbah, who he said that there's no machlekes when he's maimed lashon rishon. When he maintains the Ned's original wording, which he said, kulchem asurin chutz me'abba. So then, yeah, even Beisil would agree that it's not a neder shut mitzvah kulai because you're maintaining the original wording. The whole machlekes was when you mishana the lashon rishon. When you're saying, "Oh, had I known my father was amongst you, I wouldn't have even said kulchem. I would have said plainly or plainly as ma'abba." Oh, then the way the round explained. Now there's 2 points. One is first of all, you never meant your father in the first place, and also number 2, you wouldn't have even said the same wording. Okay, this neder is being changed from what its original format was. That's a neder shut mitzvah. So then we're going to say huta kulai. That's what Beisil says halacha. However, now the Gemara introduces V'Rav. Rabbi says the Kulei Alma, again, this is a little bit halt cup. Rabbi says that according to everyone, the other way around. Whoever he says, had I known that my father was amongst you guys. I would have said, Pliny Asurin, meaning Beishamai is going to agree over here. That had I said that you and you are forbidden, and my father is permitted, then Kulam Mutarim. They all would have been permitted. Again, it's the same point, just one step off. Because he's saying Beishamai would agree in that case. According to Rabba's version, Beisil is going to be machmer in one case, and the machlekes is in the other case. According to Rava, it's a little bit the other way. That no, Beishamai would agree in that case of when you would change the wording, when there's both points, like we explained, that Rava holds that Beishamai would agree that wherever you could say Hut Miktsasa, you would say Hutu Kulai. So here it's considered Neder Shut Miktsasa because A, you never met father, and 2, the wording would have been different. The machlekes is only when he says, I know my father was amongst you. I would have said, you're all asur except my father. Rava holds that the machlekes is when you maintain the original wording. Beishamai holds like a mayor. The Amar that he says, and it gets a little bit complicated over here, where the Amar he says, in Mesechtes Tmur Daf Chafei Beis, when a guy says, this animal is Tmuras Oila, and then he says it's Tmur Shlam. What's a Tmur? Tmur is that you swap the sanctity of a carbon. You say this Chulin animal is Tmuras Oila, then this is Tmur Shlam. Remeir says Tafas Lashon Rishon. We grab the first wording that he said, and therefore it's going to be a Tmur Oila. That's not going to be Shlam at all. Rabbi Yisi holds that no, actually it's going to be a Tmur Shlamim, because he holds Begmar Dvar Vatim Nitvas. You go with the last thing he says. Okay. So what does it mean Beishamai is like Remeir? That Remeir says that you go with the first wording that he says. It's very interesting. You have to hold cup a little bit. This is the Ran in the 4th medium-sized lines, where he says, since in the beginning of his words, meaning the first thing that he said was Kulchem Asurin, that's like he originally said. Right? Now, even though at the end of his statement, what he's saying now is Chutz Min Abba, and he's making an error in his original words, we don't care about that. Because the primary words of a person are his initial words. And just like over there, when his first words contradict his last words. We're not concerned for what he says at the end, which is Timur Shlamim, what Reb Meir says, here also in our sugya. Even though his last words, which is Chutz min Abba, is being maintained, because it's not contradicting his first words, he's just explaining, but still, since we hold that when they contradict each other, we go with the Lashon Rishon, it's a very interesting comparison. So to here, when they don't contradict, we make the primary out of his first words. And since his first words are agreeing what he originally said with the neder, it is being maintained for the others. And there's no neder shehut miktsaseh at all, because the father was never included in the neder. It's a very interesting parallel. We're just saying we go with the first words, and the first words are being maintained what you originally said. So therefore, Rabbi Shloimy says there's no neder shehut miktsaseh. According to Rava, Rabbi Shloimy agrees to neder shehut miktsaseh hodekula, not like Rava. He agrees that we hold it, but here there's no neder shehut miktsaseh because we go with the first words that he said, and the first words are the same as the original neder. But Rabbi still hold law that he says to draw a parallel from there, just like when they contradict each other. He says, like when you say Timur Shlamim, it can't be both the Timur Oil Shlamim. He says, as a person, we go after the end of what he's saying. Oh, here also when they don't contradict, we're going to make the primary out of the last thing that he says. Oh, what's the last thing that he says? Chutz min Abba. What do you mean Chutz min Abba? What do you mean? That obviously means, say, when you originally said Kulchem, that must have been a toys. Since the Batla Miktsasai is Batla Kulai. Very fascinating comparison that Rav is making from that halacha of Timur Shlamim, do we go based on your first words or your last words, to say over here if this is being considered a deviation from your neder or not. Do we go based? Yeah, it's a very interesting parallel. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of questions that you could ask in this, but that in the primary understanding is the first thing I said was the same thing I said originally. So that's not a neder shel mitzvah. The fact that chutz min Abba, of course, that's going to be true, but I don't make that the primary, and therefore I'm not going to say that there's anything intrinsically wrong with this neder. Versus if you hold devar button, yeah, something very, very wrong. That's the primary thing. Chutz min Abba. That's not what I originally said. So that's a neder shel mitzvah. It's going to be that's the machlekes between Bashem. Now we get even a little bit more complicated. So hold on a little bit. Ezer Rapapa Rava. Rapapa asks on Rava, who we just quoted his opinion right now, from the Mishnah Samach Vav that we quoted on the previous daf. The Mishnah says, Ketza Am Rebbe Kiva. How did Rebbe Kiva say, Neder Shot B'Ktsaseh Hodekula, which we quoted that on the previous Amid. When did he say this idea that a neder that's partially, we said until Rebbe Kiva came along and he told us the concept when a neder is partially permitted, the whole thing gets permitted. What's such a case? Says the Mishnah like this. Let's say someone says, I'm taking a neder, I'm not having any benefit for all of you. If it becomes permitted to one of them, okay, so the whole thing falls apart. Because you said all of them. Once one of them is permitted, they're all permitted. Let's say he says, let's say it doesn't say all of you. He starts going through. I'm not going to have hana from you and you and you and you and you. So if the first one's permitted, they're all permitted. If the last one's permitted, the last one's permitted, they're all going to be forbidden. That's the Mishnah on Daf Samach Vav. Now, this is very complicated now. Says the Gemara like this. We had two interpretations on our Mishnah. The first interpretation from the previous Amar was Rabbah. We could understand Rabbah that he explained that the Machlekes B'Sham Yisrael was, do we say Hutter Miktsaseh Hutter Kula or not? We'd explain that one is like Rebbe Kiva and one's like Rabbanan. Rabban help, we don't say Neder Shul Mitzvah Mikula. Rebbe Kiva was Machadish this idea of Neder Shul Mitzvah Mikula. B'Sham holds we don't say Neder Shul Mitzvah Mikula, and therefore the father will be permitted, the rest will be forbidden. Whereas Beisil holds no, we will say Neder Shul Mitzvah Mikula. That's how Rabbah explained the Machlekes. So okay, very good. Mukim lo l'reisha, he's going to explain the first two cases of this Mishnah Samach Vav that we just quoted. He'll explain it to Amal Lazeh u'Lazeh. What does this mean? Again, it's a little bit complicated, but the way the Ran explains is that where a guy is changing his original words when he finds out that it's his father. Explains the Ran that because of the first case that originally he said, right? We just quoted this Mishnah. The guy says, I'm not having any hana for all of you guys. So therefore, he's saying where it's talking about where he says, lazeh u lazeh. In other words, now that he knows that his father is amongst them, he says, oh, had I known this from the beginning, I would have said you and you and you and you and you. So therefore, according to Rebbe Kiva, once one of them is permitted, they're all permitted. Why? Because again, we're trying to explain how we could understand this Mishnah of Rebbe Kiva based on the interpretation of Rabbah. Okay, since there's 2 points, there's first of all, totally mistaken regarding the father, and there's also an error regarding the wording of the other people. I wouldn't have said the word kulchem. I would have said you and you and you and you. So to the middle case, when he says, this is even more complicated. I'm not going to have a na from you and you and you. That's what he originally said. That's considered changing. It's just the changing is the opposite, the inverse of the first case. By the Reisha, he originally said, all of you guys. Now he's changing the wording to say, had I known, I would have said you and you and you and you. The middle case is talking about where he originally said, for you and you and you. Now he's changing, had I known my father was amongst you, I would have said, kulchem chutz min abba. Halkab. And what it's coming to tell us is that also would be considered a person being particular, and it would have been considered a shinui of your words, because there are people that are particular when they know their father is amongst the crowd. They don't want to say you and you and you and you. Why? Because they don't want their father to be included in the category for even a moment. So there are people that are particular. They specifically want to say you and you and you, not to say kulchem. But there are people that are particular the opposite. They specifically want to say kulchem when the father is there, and not say lazel lazeh. Why? Because when you say lazel lazeh, since you have to explain and go through every single person, and you didn't specify the father, whoever's hearing that he's starting to say you and you and you, he thinks maybe at the end he's going to mention his father also. So therefore, he rather, for the honor of his father, would rather say the neder on the others in the terminology of kulchem, so that he quickly could say chutz min abba. So people can be particular one way or the other. So therefore, in the first case of the Mishnah Daf Samach Vav, what it's coming to tell us is when you change from klal to prat, from kulchem to you and you and you, that's a shinui, and therefore once it's heter of some of it, all of it's going to be mutter. The middle case is also telling us the other way around. When you change from prat to klal, when you say it in the beginning, you and you and you, and now you say, had I known my father was there, I would have said kulchem, so that I could quickly say chutz min abba. Oh, that's also considered a shinoi, and therefore, when one of them is permitted, which the Ran explains, it will be very difficult because the Gemara is going to actually ask this question. When it says Rishon, it doesn't mean Rishon versus Achron. It just means one of you guys. So they're all going to be permitted. Now, the Seifa, what's the Seifa? Refers to the last case, meaning to say, when we said Hutter Achron, that we said only the Achron is mutter, but they're all going to be Aser, is the Amal Kulchem. Meaning that he said kulchem in the beginning and at the end. Or he said lazel lazeh in the beginning and at the end. Oh, since he's maintaining his words, so it's all the same. And therefore we said, hota achrin, what does that mean to say? It just means one of them. So then that one is mutter, the all going to be aser. Because like the Ran explains, now the Gemara assumes when it says rishon achrin, it's not precise. It just means one of them. So we just explained it, again, it's very complex. We just explained this, how you understand this Mishnah according to Rabbah. That we could understand, if you have both points, then it's going to be all be permitted. If you have only one of the points, you didn't change your wording, then it's going to be asa. But according to you, Rav, that according to everyone, when you are permitting something with a change, everyone agrees. The whole machlekes was regarding if you're maintaining the neder as it originally was, because even Beis Shammai is going to be makel according to Rav's version. So Bishlam Marisha, we understand the first case, where Rabbi Kiva says one of them is permitted, they're all going to be permitted. Where the Rabbanan disagree, okay, Mukum la da'amal kulchem. You could explain to me where he said all of you, where the Rabbanan disagree. In other words, when you're maintaining your words. And that's why it's specifically Rabbi Kiva, where he says, well, one of them is permitted, they're all going to be permitted. But according to Rabbanan, since you're maintaining your words, so we said Rabbanan don't hold of Hutu Miktsasa Hutu Kulai, so only he's going to be permitted, but they're all going to be forbidden. But as we continue to Beis, Seifa, in other words, the middle case, we're going to explain the moment from the Ran, why we're calling Seifa the middle case, and when we explained for Rabbah, we said Seifa meant the last case. Okay, but in a moment. But in the middle case, if the Amal Lazeh, in other words, then in the beginning he said all of you, and now he's changing it to you and to you. Now, when we said in the Brisa, Lazeh, that meant his last words, but originally he said kulchem. You telling me Rabbi Kiva he? That's Rabbi Kiva? What do you mean? Am I plig Rabbanan? Why would Rabbanan disagree? But Ramad, you said Divrei HaKol Mutter. You said everyone. When you're changing the words, you said even Beis Shammai, you said even Rabbanan would agree. And as the Ran is bothered by a question, says, wait a second. Why can't you just say that just like according to Rabbah, the first two cases are talking about that you changed your words, one from klal to prat, one from prat to klal. Maybe according to Rabbah, also the first two cases talking about your maimed, you maintaining your wording. It's just that the ratio is talking about when you said in the beginning at the end kulchem, and the middle case is talking about when you said in the beginning zel zeh. So then that would make sense why according to Rabbanan it would be asa for the rest. Says the Ran, you can't say that. Why? Because we understand according to Rabbah, where both of them are necessary because we're telling you whether you're changing from kulchem to lazelzeh, or you change from lazelzeh to kulchem, which is pratikal kaltapral. That's we're telling you that's a chiddush, that's a shine. But according to Rava, who the only way he explained it is by maimed, why would you need two cases to tell you the same idea that you're maintaining your word? Who cares if you're staying from kulchem to kulchem or lazelzeh to lazelzeh? That wouldn't have any element of chiddush. Rather, obviously, the first case is when you maintain your words, and the second case is when you're changing words. If that's the case, that middle case is difficult. Because how could you say this is Rebbe Kiva, not to Rabbanon? That you're saying Ketzad Omer Rebbe Kiva. What do you mean Ketzad Omer Rebbe Kiva? But if you're changing the wording, you told me even Rabbanon agree. Which the Ran said, the truth is, the Gemara could have asked on the Seifa also, because the Seifa says the last one is mutter, the old Aser. How are you going to have that even according to Rebbe Kiva? But you said that even Maimed he holds is going to be permitted. So even if you're Maimed, why would Rebbe Kiva say the rest are going to be Aser? But says the Ran, since the middle case is difficult, so he didn't wait till the Seifa. And he says, it seems to me that the reason why we said, by Bishlam L'Rabba, we called the middle case Reisha, and when we said Elididach for Rava, we called the middle case Seifa, it's because according to Rabbah, the middle case and the first case are all the same idea. It's when you're changing your wording. It's just from Klal to Prat to Prat to Klal. Therefore, we're going to call both of them Reisha. Because according to him, there's really only two cases of the Mishnah, which those are two cases of Mishana, of changing. The Seifa is a different case of Maimed, of maintaining your wording. But according to Rava, where it's not possible to explain the middle case similar to the Reisha by Maimed, because like we said, why do you need two cases of Maimed? So we call the middle case Seifa, back upon them. The Gemara says, this is a difficulty on Rava. How are you going to interpret according to Rava? So Rava says to him, wait a second. According to Rava, you think Rebbe Kiva minich, you think it makes sense according to Rebbe Kiva? But Seifa, the case when you told me that only the Achron's mutter, but the rest are going to be Aser, but my Mokum law. How's he going to explain it? Dama l'kulchem. Where you're being maimed, you're maintaining your word. You originally said kulchem, and you're still saying kulchem. That even Rebbe Kiva is going to agree, like we explained. If that's the case, hey din hu rishon, the hey din hu achron. In other words, how could you say rishon and achron? Why calling the middle case the first guy and instead of calling achron the last guy? You should have just said one of them is permitted. Because according to Rabbah, it makes sense. Rebbe Kiva agrees by maimed that's going to be asa because you're maintaining your words, and not a neder shod miktsasai. But what's rishon and achron? Ela rather says Rava, both according to me and according to Rabbah, Reisha the Amal Kulchem. The Reisha is talking about where you said all of you. It's just according to me, the Reisha is where you're maintaining your words. According to Rabbah is when you're changing words, because they had a machlekes regarding B'Shames Hill, which case did they say it on? But the Seifa, in other words, the middle case and the last case, that's not because of Neder Shod Miktsasa Hata Kulai. That's Kagoin Shetloin Zebazet. And this is how, in the rest of Shas, how they explain this halacha, which is pretty evident from the wording, is where you made it dependent one on the other. But Aman that he says, Plaini Kaplaini Uplaini Kaplaini, where originally he said, oh, I'm taking a neder, I'm not having benefit with this person. Then he says, and that person should be us like that person who I made a neder, and that third person should be like the second person. Oh, that's why it says, if you're mat to the first guy, they're all mutter because they're all dependent on the first one. It's like a chain. But if you're mat to the achron is going to be mutter, and they're all going to be forbidden because the first and the middle guy has nothing to do with the last guy. So therefore, the other two are not going to be permitted by permitting the last guy. So it has nothing to do with the halacha and Rabbah regarding a neder, nothing to do with that. It's just because they made it dependent on the first guy. And says the Gemara, Dekanami, a precise reading indicates that it's about because he made it dependent on one or the other, time like learn the Brisa. We said Hutram Tzoi, the Brisa says, and if the middle guy becomes permitted, from him and lower down are permitted because like a chain. Before that is forbidden. It has nothing to do with the machlekes Rabbah and Rabbah. It's not a difficulty. It's a whole different halacha of making it dependent one on the other. Now, but the Gemara still continues. Rava asks on Rava, which Tais actually mentions. All these questions, the Girsa is Rava, but this question itself actually is not only in Rava, it's a kolshkin that would be difficult on Rava. What's the question? So the Gemara says, the Brisa says, if someone takes a neder that onions I'm not going to taste, because onions are bad for the heart, I'd say I take a neder I'm forbidding onions. They tell him, hello, Rabbi the kurfi onion is actually good for the heart. So the halacha is hutra b'kufri, he becomes permitted, he never had that in mind, that's a neder shkogas. He's going to be permitted in the kufri onions, but it's not only for the kufri onions permitted, rather all the onions permitted. And actually, my side was a story, but May said you're permitted to have all onions. Says the Gemara, my love, isn't it talking about Dhamma that he says, Elo you say dash or could be able. Had I known that the could be onions are good for the heart, but you said, you know what I would have said? I would have said yes, like my original words. I would have said kol b'tzal masurin, all the onions are forbidden, but if a kafri mutter, but the kafri onions are permitted for me. In other words, what's the Gemara's question? This is difficult on Rava, because Rava said that the machlekes was between Bisham and Basil. When you maintain your original words, and we'd explained that who's Bisham like? Bisham is like Remeir. Remeir holds toughest lashon rishon, which is your original words, which was yes, you had originally said all of them, and you're maintaining the word all of them. Now, as the Ran explains, from the fact that Bisham is like Remeir, sounds like Remeir holds like Bishamai, which is that what did Bishamai say? That the father is permitted, but the rest are all forbidden. Wait a second, how could Remeir then say all the onions are permitted? Now, as the Ran says, for sure it's difficult according to Rabbah, because Rabbah says that when you're maimed, you maintain your words, everyone's aser, according to everyone besides the father. So if that's the case, how could Remeir say all the onions are permitted? Who is he saying like? But it's only because that Mishnah explicitly mentions Remeir, and Rava is the one who, in his conversation of Bishamai, mentioned Remeir. So we ask on Rava, but the same thing is difficult for sure on Rabbah. And the Ran just points out the Gemara could have answered that although Bishamai holds like Remeir, but Remeir doesn't hold like Bishamai, he rather holds like Basil, and that even by Maimon it would be permitted, because although Remeir holds toughest lashon rishon, that's only when it contradicts, like Oil and Shlam, when they don't contradict, when he says Chutz min Abba, so he would hold that you go based on Gemar Devar Adam Mitzvahs, and then he could hold like Basil. It's just that the Gemara is just going based on the reasoning of the questioner who says Remeir is like Bishamai, so he answers that, no, it's not even talking about a case of Maimon, it's actually talking about a case of Mashana. But the truth is, the Gemara could have answered that. The Gemara answers, Lo, you know, but we're talking about that you're Mashana your words. The guy says, had I known that the kobi onion is good for the heart, I would have said other wording. But sal plain, you plain yasurin, that onion is forbidden, which is mashana, which again, that's the case when he holds that it's going to be permitted, like the Gemara is saying that according to Rabbah, Remeir's. So this is what Rabbah would say, that it would be like you mashana your words, mekafri mutter and the kafir is permitted. Remeir, but Rabbi Kiva, he would be according to everyone. And the Ran just points out that according to Rabbah, that he says, so it comes out like this. According to Rabbah, Remeir is only according to Rabbi Kiva. And it's not difficult because Rabbah doesn't hold that Bisham is like Remeir. And therefore we could explain that Remeir is according to Rabbi Kiva. Whereas according to Rabbah, that he says that you're changing your words. So that would be according to everyone. Remeir wouldn't have to be just like the Rabbi Kiva. It could be like everyone because he's explained the case that you're changing the words. And therefore it's not difficult. Thank you to any time for hosting us.